Ethan had never quite felt at home in his wife Haley's family. It wasn't that they were overtly cruel, but the subtle disdain from her parents had always hung in the air like a thick fog, lingering even in the most ordinary of moments. Tonight, however, something felt different. The usual tension was still there, but it was amplified by a strange undercurrent he couldn't quite place. Dinner was being held at Diane and Gregory's house again, a large, elegant mansion tucked away in a well-manicured neighborhood of New York. It was the kind of place that screamed wealth without needing to shout it, the kind of place where everything was pristine and meticulously arranged. The long dining table, set with fine china and crystal glasses, gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers. Ethan had never been comfortable here, but tonight, something about the house felt suffocating. The pictures of family milestones on the walls, the polished floors, the gleaming silverware. It was all too perfect, too curated. The conversation, as usual, was about work, money, and the latest happenings in their high society circles. Diane fawned over Haley, making sure her daughter was well taken care of, while Gregory occasionally chimed in with detached, almost condescending remarks about Ethan's career. As they ate, Ethan could feel the familiar weight of their eyes on him, especially Diane's. She asked him about his latest work with a smile that was too sweet, too calculated. "How's your little photography hobby going, Ethan?" "I imagine it's quite charming. For a living," she said, her words dripping with the kind of condescension that always made his skin crawl. But tonight, it was different. There was something in the way she watched him. She was giving him more attention than usual, and it wasn't the kind of attention that felt warm or welcoming. It felt almost predatory. Ethan had noticed it when he first walked in, how she greeted him with an extra dose of enthusiasm, the way her eyes lingered a little too long when she spoke to him. It didn't sit right, and as the evening went on, his discomfort only grew. Then came the moment that set the whole evening on edge. Diane left the table for a moment, and when she returned, she was holding a tray with a single glass, one that had a deep red liquid swirling inside. "Ethan, darling," she called, her voice unusually sweet. "I made something special for you. A cocktail, just for my favorite son-in-law." She placed the glass in front of him with a wide smile, her eyes glinting as though she expected a show of gratitude. For a moment, Ethan just stared at the drink. It wasn't unusual for Diane to offer him a drink, but there was something about the way she presented it that felt off. The glass gleamed under the dim light, the liquid inside catching the light in a way that seemed intentional, as if she were waiting for something. Haley, sitting across from him, smiled at her mother's gesture. "You should try it, Ethan," she said, her voice warm and genuine, unaware of the undercurrent of tension running through the room. Ethan reached for the glass, but his hand hovered just above it. Something felt wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe it was the way Diane had almost insisted on handing him the drink herself, or the knowing look in her eyes as she watched him take it. She hadn't offered one to Gregory or Haley, only him. It wasn't just the drink. It was the whole situation. The unspoken message. It was too much. He lifted the glass to his lips, but paused before drinking. The weight of their gazes was heavy, and it made him hesitate. There was a faint taste in the air that didn't sit right with him, something almost medicinal. As he looked into Diane's eyes, his gut twisted with a cold sense of suspicion. Before he could take a sip, Diane excused herself from the table. As she walked away, Ethan noticed something he hadn't seen before. She slipped a small vial into her purse, her movements swift and deliberate, as if she were trying to hide it from view. His heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, but he kept his face calm. Ethan didn't take the drink just yet, instead setting it down carefully on the table, trying to make it look casual. The sickening feeling in his stomach intensified as he watched Diane walk out of the room. The clink of her heels echoed down the hallway as she disappeared, but the eerie silence she left behind lingered in the air. Something wasn't right. His mother-in-law's sudden interest in him, the drink, the vial. He could feel the pieces starting to form in his mind. He had to know what she was up to. But Ethan couldn't act too quickly, not without proof. He needed to keep his wits about him, and most importantly, he needed to protect Haley. If this was what he thought it was, if Diane had really tried to poison him, then the truth was darker than anything he could have imagined. Cliffhanger. Ethan noticed Diane's eyes on him as he held his drink, and he felt that something bad was about to happen. He decided to observe further, but his gut told him he was already too deep in this web of lies to back out now. Additional notes. This chapter needs to create a feeling of unease and tension. Diane's behavior should make Ethan feel more like an outsider than ever before. The subtle foreshadowing of Diane's actions should leave the reader with the same suspicion Ethan feels, building tension as they wonder what she's really up to. Ethan's reaction to the drink is crucial. It needs to be ambiguous enough to leave the reader questioning whether he's simply paranoid, or if something truly sinister is at play. After 45 minutes, Ethan felt his body starting to feel heavy, but he didn't think he was poisoned. He just thought it was probably tiredness after a long day. The exhaustion of the flight, the busy schedule, and the constant need to pretend that everything was fine with Haley's family were starting to catch up with him. He felt like he had a slight headache, but he dismissed it as something trivial, just the result of a stressful day. The meal continued around him. Diane and Gregory spoke in hushed tones, discussing stock market fluctuations and upcoming business deals. Haley tried to engage Ethan, but her attention kept drifting back to her parents, as it always did in these situations. It was an unspoken rule: keep the conversation light and avoid rocking the boat. But the more Ethan tried to push through the fatigue, the heavier his limbs felt. He had a strange, creeping dizziness that made it harder to focus on anything. His vision blurred just slightly, but enough to make the room appear as though it was tilting. His stomach churned uncomfortably, and he tried to shift in his seat to find a more comfortable position. Diane's gaze flicked to him now and then, always sharp, always calculating. She seemed content to watch him, observing his discomfort without offering any help or even acknowledging his symptoms. It was almost as if she was waiting for something, waiting for him to make a move. Ethan's pulse quickened, though he still couldn't explain why. He had to shake off the sensation of growing unease. He stood up, quietly excusing himself from the table. "Excuse me," he muttered, his voice sounding more strained than he intended. As he made his way to the living room, he reached for his phone in his pocket and tried to focus on something. Anything, to distract himself from the odd sensations in his body. But the dizziness wasn't going away. If anything, it seemed to intensify. He paused at the edge of the living room, leaning against the doorframe for support. His mind raced. Something wasn't right. A faint taste lingered at the back of his throat, a chemical aftertaste that made his stomach twist even more. He pressed his fingers to his forehead, trying to calm the throbbing headache that seemed to be creeping through his skull. In the corner of the room, Gregory continued to talk business, oblivious to Ethan's distress. Haley, too, was distracted by her father's words, not noticing her husband's discomfort. Diane's eyes never left Ethan for long, though she said nothing, offering him no help. Ethan took a deep breath. Something was wrong. This wasn't just exhaustion. He had felt tired before, sure. But this was different. His body was reacting as if he were under some kind of influence, a slow burn of fatigue spreading through his veins. His mind snapped to the cocktail Diane had handed him earlier. The same cocktail that had been the source of all this unease. He hadn't drunk much of it, but it was enough to make him question everything. Walking to the kitchen, Ethan opened the cabinet and pulled out a glass. He filled it with water, his hands trembling slightly. He needed to clear his mind, needed to feel a bit more in control. As he sipped, his thoughts drifted back to the cocktail. He had seen Diane slip something into it when he wasn't looking. Something in her movements, quick, deliberate, had caught his attention. And now, the effects were starting to hit him. He placed the glass down on the counter, his fingers pressing the rim of the glass as he looked inside. The water rippled slightly, and then he noticed it. A thin film, almost imperceptible, floating just beneath the surface of the water. It caught the light as it floated, faint, but undeniably there. His heart dropped into his stomach. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, staring at the glass. He blinked several times, as if he could will the film to disappear, but it didn't. It was real. Something had been added to his drink. Something that didn't belong there. He felt the blood drain from his face. His suspicions were now confirmed, and a wave of panic surged through him. Diane had drugged him. His hands shook as he reached for the glass, his mind racing. He hadn't imagined it. This wasn't just fatigue or stress. It was something far more sinister. But why? Why would Diane do this? He couldn't let this go, but he couldn't act too rashly either. He needed proof. He needed to be sure. Ethan quickly grabbed the glass and poured a sample of the water into a small vial he kept in his bag. He would have to take it to a lab. He could feel his breath catch in his throat. The idea of telling Haley the truth was terrifying. What would happen to their marriage if he revealed what Diane had done? Could he even trust Haley knowing her mother was capable of something so malicious? His mind spun, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to find out more. He had to have evidence, something concrete that would expose Diane for what she truly was. But as he stood there looking at the vial of water in his hand, he realized something else. He couldn't tell Haley, not yet. If the truth came out now, it might destroy everything. Cliffhanger. Ethan decided to bring a sample of the glass of water to the doctor for testing, but he didn't dare tell Haley. He was afraid that the truth might ruin their relationship forever. There's no doubt that Diane tried to poison me. But now the important thing is, how can I get revenge without hurting Haley? Ethan sat at his desk in his small office, the glow of the computer screen casting long shadows over his tired face. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the test results in front of him. The evidence was undeniable. Diane had spiked his drink with a powerful sedative. It wasn't lethal, but it had made him feel weak, disoriented, and vulnerable. The lab report confirmed it. Benzodiazepines, a heavy dose. He had no idea how long she had been doing this, but now, he was sure. He wasn't just paranoid. He had proof. A part of him felt vindicated, but another part of him felt a strange emptiness. All these years, he had tried to fit in with her family, to make Haley proud. But now, the woman he had once respected, his mother-in-law, had proven herself to be something far darker than he had ever imagined. He had expected the quiet disdain, the passive-aggressive remarks, but this? Poisoning him? This crossed every line. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keys. He had already gathered everything. The toxicology report, the records of Diane's multiple prescriptions for anxiety medication, the evidence of her taking more than prescribed. The pieces were all there. But what was he going to do with it? He couldn't just hand it to the authorities. This wasn't just about legal justice. This was about confronting the person who had tried to tear him down and destroy his relationship with his wife. But how could he do that without breaking Haley's heart? How could he expose her mother and not destroy the very foundation of their marriage? His eyes flickered over to the photo on his desk. Haley, smiling brightly on their wedding day. She had always stood by him, even when her parents never seemed to accept him. This was the woman he loved, the woman who had been by his side for everything. He couldn't let this destroy her. But he couldn't let Diane get away with it either. Ethan leaned forward and clicked through the files again. He needed a plan. He couldn't just confront Diane blindly. She was cunning. She would deny everything. He needed her to admit what she had done. He needed proof, something undeniable, something that would show everyone who Diane really was. But how could he make her confess? He picked up the vial containing the remaining sample of the cocktail and examined it. It still had a strange tint to it under the light. A dull, almost sinister sheen. He wasn't sure what kind of chemical compound he could trace, but if he could get her to acknowledge the truth, maybe he could trap her. He didn't want to cause a scene. He just needed her to admit her guilt. The more he thought about it, the clearer the answer became. He had to confront her directly. He needed to be calm, collected. He couldn't let his emotions get in the way of his goal. Diane was a master manipulator, and she would try to twist everything, make him look crazy, or make it seem like he was just overreacting. But Ethan couldn't fall for that again. He needed to stay focused. The next day, Ethan didn't mention his suspicions to Haley. He couldn't, not yet. He wasn't sure how to even begin explaining it. Instead, he made an excuse to leave the house early, heading straight to Diane's place. Climax. It was late afternoon when Ethan arrived at Diane and Gregory's house. He had come prepared. The vial of water, the toxicology report, and the prescription records were all tucked neatly in his briefcase. His heart pounded as he rang the doorbell. He could already hear Gregory's voice from inside, deep and gravelly, like it always was. Diane opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Ethan, what a surprise," she said, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It never did when he was around. "Hello, Diane. I need to speak with you," Ethan said, his voice steady but cold. Diane looked at him, her eyes flickering with unease, but she stepped aside to let him in. "Of course. Come on in. What's this about?" Ethan didn't waste time with pleasantries. He dropped the briefcase onto the kitchen counter and opened it. "I know what you did. You poisoned me, Diane." He said it simply, but his words hung heavy in the air between them. For a moment, Diane stood frozen. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, but she quickly regained composure, her lips curling into a tight smile. "What are you talking about, Ethan? I haven't poisoned you. This is ridiculous." Ethan reached into the briefcase and pulled out the test results. The lab confirmed it. "The drink you gave me had benzodiazepines in it. Enough to knock me out. What else could it be?" Diane's expression faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice cool and dismissive. "Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe you're tired from your travels." She glanced around as if searching for a way out, but Ethan wasn't about to let her off the hook. "No," Ethan said, stepping forward, his voice firm. I saw you putting something in my drink, and I'm not going to let you get away with this." Diane's face tightened, the mask of calm slipping. "You have no proof," she said, her voice rising slightly. "This is all in your head, Ethan. You've always had issues with me. You've always been paranoid about me." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "If you think you can ruin everything, you're wrong." Cliffhanger. Diane's words struck a nerve. She wasn't backing down. "If you try to expose me," she continued, her voice low and threatening, "I will make sure Haley never believes you. I'll destroy your relationship with her." Ethan's heart sank. He had been prepared for the fight, but hearing her threats made him question everything. Could he really win this fight without losing Haley? As Diane stood there, her arms crossed, looking every bit the woman who had orchestrated this entire twisted scheme, Ethan felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had to choose. Expose Diane and risk everything, or back down and let her win. Ethan couldn't wait any longer. He had gathered enough evidence, the test results, the prescription records, the vial of water. He had been patient, calm, waiting for the right moment, but the truth was too heavy to carry anymore. Diane had gone too far, and he knew he couldn't keep quiet, not when the stakes were so high. But as the weight of his decision settled on his chest, another question plagued him. Would this hurt Haley? His hands trembled as he dialed the number on his phone. Haley was at work, and Diane had no idea that Ethan was on his way to confront her. The plan was simple. Confront her, present the evidence, and get her to admit what she had done. But Ethan's heart beat wildly in his chest, the fear of destroying everything he loved flooding him. As Ethan arrived at Diane and Gregory's house, the looming presence of the mansion filled him with dread. The grand entryway was darkened by the evening sky, and the soft yellow light from the chandeliers cast long shadows across the walls. The family portraits hung solemnly in their frames, watching, judging. The air was thick with tension, almost as if the house itself knew what was about to happen. Inside, Diane was sitting in the living room, her usual serene smile plastered on her face. But as Ethan walked in, she immediately looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she had expected him. "Good evening, Ethan." "What's this about?" she asked, her voice sugar-sweet but her eyes cold. "I have proof, Diane," Ethan said, his voice steady, but his insides churning. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the toxicology report. "You tried to poison me." He slapped the papers down onto the coffee table, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. Diane's eyes flickered briefly, but she quickly regained her composure. She leaned back in her chair, a forced smile tugging at her lips. "Poison you?" She laughed lightly, almost dismissively. "Ethan, you're overreacting. This is ridiculous." Ethan's heart raced as he stepped forward, not backing down. "You're not going to deny it, are you?" He motioned to the vial of water he had brought with him. "I saw you put something in my drink, Diane. I have the evidence. It's in black and white." She scoffed, looking down at the papers with feigned disinterest. "This is nonsense. A misunderstanding, perhaps? You're tired, Ethan. Stress from work. Maybe you're imagining things." But Ethan wasn't fooled. "Stop pretending," he snapped. "I saw you. You hid that vial when I walked into the kitchen. Don't try to make this about something else. You tried to poison me, and I want you to admit it." Diane's smile faded slightly, but she didn't flinch. "You're being irrational. I don't know what you think you've seen, but this—" She waved her hand over the papers dismissively. "This is nothing." Ethan's anger flared. "It's not nothing, Diane. You don't get to sweep this under the rug. You drugged me, and I won't let you get away with it. You can lie all you want, but the truth is out. I know what you did." Diane's eyes turned cold, and for a moment, the facade cracked. "You think you have all the answers, don't you?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just waltz in here and expose me, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. You really think Haley will believe you over her own mother?" Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Her words stung, but they didn't deter him. "I don't care about what you think, Diane. This is bigger than you and me. This is about the truth, and Haley deserves to know who you really are." Diane stood up, her movements swift and controlled, as if she were trying to regain the upper hand. "You think Haley will ever trust you after this?" she sneered. "You've always been a disappointment to her family. You think she'll believe your wild accusations over her mother's word? She'll choose us, Ethan. She always has." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You don't know her like I do," he said quietly. "She'll believe me." For a moment, there was silence. Diane's gaze turned sharp, like a predator sensing vulnerability in her prey. "You think you can just come in here and destroy everything I've worked for?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You really believe you can expose me and get away with it? If you keep pushing this, if you keep telling Haley the truth, I'll ruin everything for you. I'll make sure she never believes a word you say." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What are you threatening?" he asked, his voice trembling with the realization of what she was capable of. Diane's lips curled into a wicked smile. "I'm threatening that if you go any further, if you continue to expose me for what I've done, I'll make sure Haley never trusts you again. I'll make sure she believes only me." Her eyes bored into his, cold and calculating. "You can't win this fight, Ethan. You don't even know what you're up against." Ethan felt the weight of her words press down on him. Could he really win this fight without losing everything? Could he expose Diane without losing Haley in the process? The realization hit him like a wave, crashing over him with all its force. He couldn't risk it. Not yet. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to back down. Cliffhanger Diane's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, as she stared at Ethan with cold, unforgiving eyes. "Haley will never believe you. She'll choose me, and you'll be left with nothing." Ethan stood there, the truth weighing heavily in his chest, his mind racing. What now? Could he still win this battle without losing Haley? After all the plotting, Ethan knew it was time to break the silence and make Diane pay. It had taken him weeks of careful thought, but now, sitting at the dining table in their own home, he was ready. The evidence was in front of him: emails, videos, medical records, and the toxicology report. Everything pointed to Diane and Gregory. They had manipulated him, tried to control him, and now it was time to confront the truth, even if it meant shattering everything he and Haley had built. The apartment felt suffocating. The usual comfort of their home, the place where they had shared laughter and quiet moments, was now a cage. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as he and Haley sat across from each other. The dim light from the table lamp cast long shadows on their faces, highlighting the heaviness between them. Haley, who had just come home from work, seemed oblivious to the storm that had been brewing for days. She smiled at him, but there was something in her eyes, a hint of fatigue, maybe, or uncertainty. She had no idea what was coming. "Ethan, what's going on?" Haley asked, setting her purse down with a soft clink. "You've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" Ethan swallowed, his mouth dry. His stomach twisted as he looked at her, trying to find the right words. He had never wanted to hurt her, but the weight of the truth was too much to keep hidden any longer. Haley ... His voice broke slightly, but he steadied himself. "I have to tell you something. Something you need to know about your parents." Her eyes softened in concern. "What do you mean? Is this about your family again? I told you we've been over this." "No," Ethan interrupted gently. "This is about your mother and father. They've been controlling me, manipulating me, and they tried to poison me." The words hung in the air, suspended, and for a long moment Haley just stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Poisoned?" she whispered, her voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about, Ethan?" Ethan reached for the pile of papers and opened the folder with the toxicology report. "I have proof," he said quietly, sliding the papers across the table. "The drink they gave me that night. It had benzodiazepines in it. Enough to knock me out. I've been digging into their lives, looking for answers, and everything leads back to them. Diane and Gregory. They've been trying to tear me down, Haley." She slowly picked up the papers, her hands shaking slightly as she flipped through the pages. The color drained from her face as she saw the medical reports, the emails that spoke of manipulation, and the security footage showing Diane putting something into his drink. "No," she muttered, as if trying to convince herself it wasn't true. This can't be real." Ethan watched her, his heart in his throat. "I wish it weren't true, but it is. You need to see this for yourself. They've been playing you. Playing us both. All this time, they've been pulling the strings, controlling everything." He could feel the weight of her disbelief pulling her away from him. But he couldn't stop now. Haley's face was pale, her eyes wide as she absorbed the truth. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. How could my mother do this? My father, too." Ethan stood, pacing nervously, his mind racing. "Haley, I didn't want you to find out like this, but you need to know what they've been doing. They tried to manipulate me, control me, and when that didn't work, they tried to take me out. Your mother, she's not the person you think she is." "I don't understand," Haley whispered, her voice breaking. "How could they do this to you? To us? All these years? I didn't even see it." Ethan paused, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. "I know. I didn't want to tell you this. I didn't want to be the one to tear apart your family, but I can't live a lie. You deserve the truth." For a moment, Haley just sat there, staring at the papers in front of her, the silence between them stretching out like an endless chasm. Her face twisted with pain as she looked up at him. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Ethan." Ethan's chest tightened. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the battle between love and loyalty. She had always been torn between him and her family, but this was different. This wasn't a small disagreement. It was the truth, raw and painful, and it was breaking them both. "I don't want to destroy you, Haley," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "I just want you to see the truth. You need to understand what they've done, what they've been hiding. I know it's hard, but you can't let them control us anymore." She looked down at the papers again, her hands trembling as she tried to comprehend everything. I don't know what to do with this. I can't just..." Ignore it. But how do I choose between you and my family? The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He had never wanted to put her in this position. But now, there was no going back. The truth was out. And they were both caught in the fallout. Cliffhanger Haley stood up abruptly, pacing the room, her emotions a whirlwind. I need time to think, Ethan. I can't make a decision right now. She paused, looking at him, her face torn between love and betrayal. I don't know what to do. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. He knew she needed time, but he couldn't help but feel like everything they had built was slipping through his fingers. Would she choose him, or would her loyalty to her family tear them apart? Just when Diane thought she had won, Ethan appeared with a perfect strategy, bringing everything to an end. The final confrontation had been building up for weeks, and now, with everything on the line, Ethan was ready to face the people who had tried to ruin him. Diane and Gregory had thought they could control him, break him, but he had learned too much, gathered too much evidence to let them get away with it. Ethan stood at the door of Diane's house, the place where it had all started. The house that had always felt cold and foreign to him, despite all the years he had spent trying to fit in. This time he was not the outsider. This time, he had the power. He stepped inside, briefcase in hand, his resolve as steady as his heartbeat. Haley, standing beside him, was quiet, but he could feel her presence, her support. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs. Diane and Gregory might have thought they controlled everything, but they were wrong. Ethan had gathered the evidence, emails, videos, lab reports, and he wasn't going to back down. Is everyone here? Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. Diane, standing at the center of the room, gave him a tight smile. Ethan, she said sweetly, though her eyes held a hint of wariness. What's this all about? Gregory sat on the couch, arms crossed, his face neutral, but his eyes flickering to Ethan with something that almost resembled guilt, though it was far too late for that now. Haley stood by Ethan's side, her face pale but determined. She was ready to hear the truth, even if it shattered everything she had known about her parents. I'm here to set things straight, Ethan said, his voice unwavering. He walked to the center of the room, laying the evidence on the coffee table in front of them. I have proof. Proof that you tried to ruin my life. Diane, he turned to her, his gaze unflinching. You poisoned me. You've been manipulating me and Haley for years. Diane's face remained frozen in a false smile, though her eyes shifted quickly to Gregory. This is absurd, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. You have no proof. This is all just misunderstanding. Ethan pulled out the toxicology report and slid it across the table. I have all the proof I need. The drink you gave me that night had benzodiazepines in it, Diane. You spiked it. You knew exactly what you were doing. Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between Diane and Ethan. This is getting out of hand, he muttered, his voice tight. You're making accusations without any real basis. Ethan clenched his fists, his anger rising, but he kept his cool. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been part of this too. All the manipulation, the control. You tried to drive a wedge between me and Haley for years. Gregory's face flushed as he stood up, his usual indifference replaced by a flicker of unease. We were just trying to protect our daughter. You were trying to control her, Ethan cut in. You wanted her to follow your path, your way, and you tried to push me out. This isn't about protecting her. This is about controlling her life, and mine. And now you've crossed a line. Diane's eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, but Ethan wasn't finished. I know what you've done, he said, his voice colder now. The emails, the manipulations, the lies. You've tried to tear me down at every turn, but I won't let you do it anymore. Gregory's eyes darkened as he spoke again. You don't know what you're dealing with, he warned. We've done what we thought was best for Haley. She's our daughter. We only want what's best for her. You think this is what's best for her? Haley's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. She stepped forward, standing beside Ethan, her face a mix of pain and resolve. You think lying to me, manipulating me, and trying to control everything is what's best for me? Diane's gaze flickered with panic for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Haley, darling, I only wanted you to have a good life. I only wanted what was best for you. No, Haley said firmly, shaking her head. You wanted what was best for you, and you tried to control everything. You tried to control me, Ethan. My choices, everything. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. You betrayed me, Mom. Both of you did. Ethan watched the confrontation unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment where everything would change. It wasn't just about Diane and Gregory anymore. It was about him and Haley, about rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. Diane stood still, her face pale, the mask of control slipping away. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. I did what I thought was best. I only wanted to protect you. Protect me? Haley repeated, her voice rising. You've been lying to me my whole life, trying to manipulate me into believing that your way was the only way. You've poisoned Ethan, and you've tried to poison our marriage. How could you do this to me? Diane took a step back, her eyes welling with unshed tears. I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to make the same mistakes. But Ethan wasn't done. You tried to destroy me and you almost succeeded. But now it's time for you to face the truth. It's time for both of you to face the consequences of your actions. Cliffhanger. As Diane and Gregory stood in stunned silence, the weight of their actions hanging heavily in the air, Ethan stood firm. Haley, tears in her eyes, turned to him, her face filled with sorrow. I don't know if I can forgive them, but I can't live a lie anymore. Ethan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And as he stood there, the future uncertain, he knew that things would never be the same again. After everything that had transpired, the weight of the truth settled heavily in Ethan's chest. Diane and Gregory had tried to break him, but he had stood his ground. Justice had come, albeit slowly, but it came nonetheless. In the end, the truth had a way of unveiling itself, no matter how hard the darkness tried to cover it up. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Diane and Gregory had thought they were invincible, controlling everything from behind the scenes, but in the end, it was their actions that led to their downfall. Ethan, with his unwavering resolve, had shown that standing up against injustice, no matter the cost, was the only path to true freedom. Sometimes, the weight of a single, courageous step is enough to change the course of a lifetime.